afterwards. I won't make this a public recording, so I'll just share it with people who've actually expressed an interest in this topic. And if you find it ultimately as beneficial, then feel free to forward that recording on that I'll share with you via email after this call to other people that you think may benefit as well. But without further ado, let's get started. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Jazakallah khair for taking out some time on this Saturday afternoon or evening, I should say. I think that, the first thing we should all do is, really purify our intention that we really do genuinely want to benefit our masajid by, using knowledge, using advice, using guidance and modern technology where relevant, so that we can further the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way that we're going to be running this seminar is, firstly, I'll ask Mufti Bilal to say some words, and then after that we'll dive into the actual presentation itself, and I'll go through 8 different ways, strategies that we can think about to benefit our masajid from an economic perspective, and then we'll have some Q&A, and then we'll wrap up inshallah. So let me hand over to Mufti Bilal.
Jazakallah Ibrahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulih al-kareem, amma ba'd. First of all, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all the participants. It's a privilege for me to be here and to say a few words to you all on this very important topic. Now, why is raising money important for the masajid? I think there are 2 aspects to this question, and we need to understand them very clearly. The why, and also the objective, the ultimate objective of managing the fund of the masajid. These are 2 aspects that are very important to understand today. First of all, we need to understand why we need to raise money for the masajid. It is not a money-making scheme to enrich the committee or to enrich the imams. We need to take this out of our mind to start up with. Masajid belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The masajid, they are one of the most important endowment assets that you can find. Even there are ulama that disagree on whether part of the endowment asset, which we call waqf asset, some ulama disagree as to whether the ownership of the waqf asset remain in the donor or whether it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, if you donate a car as a waqf asset, does the ownership remain in the donor or does it belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So some ulama, they disagree about that. However, when it comes to the masajid, which is one of the most important waqf assets which I mentioned, all ulama agree that masajid cannot be owned by anybody but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we are talking about making money for the masajid, we have to understand that this money is not for us, but it is for the cause of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is for the sake of his houses, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why in the hadith the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, according to the nearest meaning, that whoever build a masjid for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah in return will give this person a house. So when you're building the masajid, you're building a house for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in return, Allah will reward you by giving you a house where, not in this world, but in Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. So when we say whoever build a masjid, it does not mean necessarily whoever build it physically, but it is also part of those, it also includes those who maintain the masajid. It also includes those who manage the fund of the masajid. Because we have to understand one thing today, masajid can run out of fund. Even if the masajid, they belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it does not mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send the fund to run the masajid from the sky or from the heaven. This is run through our own effort. And if we do not put the effort into it, then there is a great risk for the masajid to be closed down. And we have seen this throughout history. Even today, there are masajid that are being demolished because of the inability of people to manage the masajid correctly. We have seen this year in the UK that the masajid were running out of funds during the COVID-19 crisis. The British Council of Masajid made an announcement earlier this year that there was a risk for the masajid to be closed down forever. And this should be a wake-up call for all of us, that masajid does not sit on a mine of gold. Money does not come from the heaven. It comes from human being ultimately. And as longer you will find people to give money to the masajid will surely run. But what if tomorrow there are not people to give the money? What if people do not want to give the money? And there are people, and I will mention it shortly, there are people who do not want to give money to the masajid. So we need to understand that when we are talking about raising money for the masajid, is that because first of all, masajid can run out of funds. That's first thing. Secondly, we need to understand the role of the masajid. People have this mentality that the masjid is a place where you just come and pray and that's it. But masjid needs to play a better role, especially in the West. It needs to play a more important role for the community. It is not just about opening up the doors and opening up a space for people and come to pray. That is the primary objective of masajid. But masajid needs to have a better role to serve the community at large. How is this masjid going to keep people connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because we need to face another thing, is that there are people today in 2020 in the UK that are leaving the deen. They are completely rejecting Islam. And this, if the masjid do not get together, if the people who are running the masjid, they do not get together, they do not think about it, and they do not worry about this, then we have a problem here. If we want to bring out solution to serve the community, then we will need the funding. And funding, again, should not come just from donors. It should come from other means as well. I have been to many countries around the world, and I can speak from where I come from in Reunion Island, and I know this is a case here as well. They are, alhamdulillah, they are masajid that are well managed. They have assets they put on lease, and the revenues come on a monthly basis. And through these revenues, they can pay the imams and pay all the expenses of the masajid, and they do not need to rely on the donation from the musallis. Ultimately, we need to have this mentality. Not all the masajid can get to that stage. I understand that, because some masajid, they are small, some are bigger, etc. But we cannot just rely on the donation that we get from people. We cannot just say to ourselves, if we need money, no problem, we will go to so-and-so, because so-and-so is a millionaire and so has got the habit of giving us money, therefore we will get money from him. That is fine, but we need to think ahead. This is something that is very important. We need to think ahead. And I'm going to give you a very brief example of a masjid who thought ahead. My friend was telling me in France, one of his local masjid, they thought so much ahead that they prepared themselves in the instance where the masjid had to disappear. What if they had to sell the masjid? What, for whatever reason, the government tell them that we need to close down this masjid, etc. You need to get rid of the asset. They prepared a document that says that in the case where we need to liquidate the asset of the masjid and we need to sell the masjid itself, then the money will go to the Kingdom of Morocco, to the Awqaf of Morocco. If the Kingdom of Morocco does not exist in that time, then the money, the fund will go to the University of Al-Azhar. And if the money, if Al-Azhar University does not exist in that time, then the money will ultimately go to the Kingdom of Saudi. This is what we're talking about when we say about thinking ahead, planning ahead. This is part of the deen, to think ahead. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to think ahead. He never used to just think about the present. He used to think about what used to come after. So we need to have this mentality that when we're talking about raising the fund for the masajid, it's not just about making money and keep money inside the bank account of the masjid, but it is about how to use this money to serve the community, how to serve the masjid, and how to plan ahead. What if tomorrow the source of revenues of the masjid is cut off? Do we have an alternative or not? And the second point I wanted to make was about the management of the fund. And that is very important. I mentioned earlier that there are people that do not want to give the money to masjid because they feel that the masjid is not managing the money properly. Not, I am not here to say this is a fault of the committee or this is a fault of the imam. No, it's not about that. But it is about that we need to rethink about it. Why is that people think like that for? How should we be working with the musallis and the people that come to the masjid? How can we change their mindset? Why do they think like that for? I know masajid that do, as I said, that do have asset, but because of internal issues, they do not want to lease their asset, and there's no revenues coming from that. There are masajid, they have too much fund. I know some masjid, they have fund in the bank account, and they do not want to use it. And you think to yourself, why are they not using this money when there is a need for the community for this money to be spent? But they do not spend the money at all. There are masajid that do have the money, but there is no transparency. We don't even know how much money they have in the bank account or not. It does not mean that there are people putting money in their bank account or in their own pocket, sorry. Although this happened as well. This happened as well. There are people that have put the money of the masajid in the bank account, in their own pocket. But this is why we need to be more transparent. Earlier, when I forwarded the message on WhatsApp about this webinar, one response that I received, the first response I received on a group was, even when masajid, they are rich, they do not want to spend the money on the community. Why is that people think like that for? So we need, it's not just about making money, but it's also about managing it. The waqf management, the management of masjid is a whole science. And I would also invite everyone to learn about these things. Don't learn just about making money for the masajid, but also learn about the technique of management that will be beneficial for your masajid and for your community, inshallah ta'ala. I will hand it back over to Ibrahim. Jazakallah khair al-jazaa.
Jazakallah khairan, Mufti Saab. Really appreciate your, your words, and I think it comes from a place where you've actually had a lot of hands-on experience of being an imam and being involved with masajid over the years. So you can't really beat that kind of actual practical experience. So I'm going to dive in now, inshallah, and start the presentation. If you just give me a few seconds to get this sorted. Okay, Mohsin, can you just confirm that you can see the slide for me?
Yep, all good.
All right, great. So I can't see the chat anymore, but I'll dive in, inshallah. So the idea behind this presentation is really that we needed we as an organization and as a community, we need to really think about what are the kind of big things that we can change with relatively little impact, with relatively little work that can actually really move the needle. So think of it as a low-hanging fruit. And when we had a bit of a think, the masjid was the obvious one, right? Where it has so much potential, and if we make a few relatively small tweaks to the way that we run our masajid, then inshallah it can do a lot for the community. So inshallah, I'll dive in. The way we're going to do this is, firstly, just really clarify why we should do this in the first place. Secondly, go through who we are for people who don't know who we are, though I suspect lots of you will, because you might have heard of this from our email list. Then we'll talk through 8 strategies and worked examples of those as well, and then we'll have Q&A. We actually, depending on how how you guys find this and how useful you find it, I have actually got a whole bunch of other strategies as well, and we can maybe take a a temperature of the room at the end of this if it's worth doing a second webinar, and I'm more than happy to do that and just run through those as well and how they would work. So the first thing is, it has to be about impact. Like, why are we raising money for the masjid? We are raising money for the masjid, as Mufti Saab said, ultimately to benefit our community. Ultimately, it all goes back down to the purpose of creation, right? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I do not create jinn and mankind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, except but to worship me. And that means to have that aspect of ubudiyyah and submission and putting what he wants before what we want in absolutely everything. But in order to do that, we need to have ihsan, right? That doesn't mean that we try and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and try and do da'wah and try and help the community, help the poor in a substandard, mediocre way. It means we do it with real ihsan. And if I say to you, think of the newsagent down the street versus I don't know, Amazon or Uber, right? Very, very different businesses, of course, but you have so many people who will run an average business in a fairly relaxed manner versus Uber or Amazon, who you clearly say, look, they're putting in a lot of effort into running this business as best as they possibly can. So that's what I guess what I mean by ihsan, which is you really try and reach the pinnacle of what you're trying to achieve. Of course, running a masjid shouldn't be done for personal gain or profitability, but having said that, it should be run with a business mindset when it comes to finances. However, that doesn't mean that it should affect one's heart in any way. The other thing is that it saves a masjid so much friction and time wasted in terms of fundraising. And there's the amount of time it takes to do a fundraising that isn't going very well is an inordinate amount of time, a long time. In contrast, a fundraising that goes really well happens quickly and it's over and done with, and actually you can use that time much more effectively. So that's the other big thing. And then finally, it's the reason why we need to really think about our masjids long term is because the assets that we collect up in that masjid are the assets that are then going to serve that community quite strategically and quite impactfully. And how that strategy and impact looks, that's a conversation for another day. But the Church of England has been doing this strategic and impactful approach for many years, and they have an endowment of £8 billion. And that endowment is growing every year. And for people in the UK, and I know we've got lots of people from the Caribbean, Nigeria, Netherlands, and other countries on this webinar at the moment. But for those in the UK, that the churches are shutting down in England. The masjids are growing, but the churches are shutting down. And yet the Church of England has £8 billion. And that, even on an average year, would be churning about 500 million or so just in pure income. Now imagine what good we could potentially do as a Muslim community with 500 million pounds, right? That would be the end of dodgy wudu facilities and imams who are underpaid and all the other problems that we have. So where do we start with that? A part of it is making sure that institutions like Masjid are really building out their finances so they are strong for the long term. Okay, so let me just make sure that the right slide is on screen. Yeah, so an introduction to IFG. So that's me and Mohsin on the screen. In brief, we are former corporate lawyers. We both met many years ago when we were students at Oxford, and we set up Islamic Finance Guru essentially as a labor of love in 2015, and we ran it as a blog, community blog, for about 4 years, putting our content out alongside our corporate law jobs. Alhamdulillah, people found it quite useful, so we continued, and things continue to grow. And now, alhamdulillah, we reach an audience of around 50,000 people a month, and we have a proper, structure now. We've got, proper members of the team. We actually quit our corporate jobs a few months ago, just before COVID-19, and went full time at this. And for us, yeah, of course, there's an element of risk. But the way we see it is that, inshallah, the mission that we're on, and I'll tell you a little bit about our mission in just a second, that the mission that we're on, if we can achieve that, then, inshallah, we'll have done a great deal of good for the community. And if we fail, then at least we'll get the reward for that. And what's our mission? So the way we see it is that there are so many issues with the world, and one of the key aspects that we are personally good at, that we can contribute with, is the economic aspect. Just Mohsin and I are, quite interested in investment, in finance, in entrepreneurship, and we realize that if you can just make the average Muslim a little bit better off, then, globally, you've got a quarter of the world's population that is Muslim, but they are 20% poorer than the rest of the world. And if you can just start addressing that issue, if you can start narrowing that economic divide, then you can have a whole range of great outcomes, such as positive health outcomes, positive education outcomes, underrepresentation in media and politics is addressed, overrepresentation in prisons, a lack of large Muslim businesses and corporates. We want Muslim Googles and Muslim Facebooks and Amazons, etc., and we don't necessarily have that. So to achieve that, we thought, okay, so how can we practically do that? And we think that there's two key ways. One is by helping every Muslim out there sort out their personal finances. And then the second way is by supporting entrepreneurs to be the next big thing. And the purpose of today really is to focus in on this personal finance aspect, because the Masjid is an enabling cog to all of this. Because if the Masjid is weak, then we are not really, as a community, gelled together. We as a community are unable to really, unite together as a community. And if the Masjid is weak, then we are not giving the relevant education, the relevant guidance that we need, the relevant support that we need for all of this stuff. Because when you think about it, the Masjid is that local depot station where the rest of the world comes to, and then the delivery goes onwards. So if you think about it like the Royal Mail, they've got lots of depot stations, and the deliveries come to the local stations, and then they are distributed out to the households. The Masjid is that cog. But if the Masjid is weak, then there is a lack of delivery, and then suddenly you only have people who rely on online, or you don't have people. You have people who don't have any touch with the Muslim community, and both of those things are extremely bad. So that's why we want to make sure that the Masjid is great. Okay, so now we're going to dive in. And if you're taking notes, this is a slide to be taking notes on. And I know it looks a bit scary, but let me just talk you through it. It's actually really, really straightforward, and it's a formula that you can just memorize and apply to all sorts of different things. So the formula is profit equals revenue minus cost. Profit equals revenue minus cost. And then, so if we just think about that for a second, what that means is if revenue goes up and costs stay the same, then profit will go up. If revenue stays the same and costs go down, then profit goes up. So what that tells us is if we can somehow increase revenues or we can somehow decrease costs, then either way, we're going to be able to increase profits. And then let's drill down specifically into profits themselves. So profits are just price times quantity. So what I mean by that is, if you have a madrasa, for example, that has 20 people and the monthly fees is £10. Now, if you manage to increase the monthly fees and keep the same number of people, that's an increase in profit. If you manage to increase the number of people but keep the same fees, that's an increase in profit. So either way, you can do that. And this is just a good formula to think about the ways that you can potentially make a difference. So price times quantity is the revenue aspect. And then on the cost side, you've got certain fixed costs and certain variable costs. So fixed costs are things like, the rent, perhaps, if you need to pay that for the masjid, or the cost of the imam, for example, is a fixed cost. A variable cost could be that if you pay someone to come in and teach in the madrasa on a variable hourly basis, then that's a variable cost. The more he teaches, the more you have to pay. So then the formula is profit equals P times Q minus FC plus VC. But really, in a nutshell, profit equals revenue minus cost. That's basically it. And so to give you examples, revenue streams include donations, or the madrasa as a classic example. Costs include utility bills, repair work, building work, salaries, equipment, and ad hoc things that you might need to spend on. So now we're going to go through, 8 strategies, and these are not really that wacky and out there. These are just really bread and butter, simple strategies that I thought I'd focus on for this one, because, these are things that everyone can do. The first one, right? The first one is the big one, and these are the 8 strategies here. We'll go through them now. The first one is the donations optimization strategy, and every masjid, of course, there's an element of donation, and of course, you need to have that. Now, what are the key things that we can think of that, inshallah, if we can solve, then we can really address the low donations that we might be getting? The first, I think, is people don't always have cash. Certainly, in the modern era, people don't always have cash. In the UK, over half of payments are now done by card, and certainly in the younger generation, they often will not have their cash with them. They will have a card, and they will almost always have their phones. And in fact, some of them will get them out in the masjid as well, but we won't talk about that. So that's the first problem. The second problem we have is people don't always visit the same masjid. You have lots of people who come to Jummah and might be just visiting, might be just passing by, or they might even, they have 3 or 4 masajid in the local area, and they might not go to the same one every time. The third issue is that people don't give large amounts. And then the fourth is donations are inconsistent and unpredictable. Some weeks you might have a great fundraiser and have hundreds, if not thousands of pounds raised. Other weeks you might have nothing. And that's not really a stable way of running a masjid or running a charitable business, if you want to think of it that way. So really key solutions to that would be, firstly, have contactless payment, right? So that's, it's such an easy win that I think so many masajid should be doing immediately. Like if there was contactless payment, then all of those people that are coming to the masjid who would give but cannot give because they don't have cash would then give, right? And that is a big subset of the community. So we need to have contactless payment. The second thing is, in order to make predictable the incomings, there needs to be a real shift towards direct debit focused giving, as opposed to just sending a bucket around and getting that picked up. And by the way, on the contactless payment, you can have roaming people with a contactless machine, just like the uncle with a bucket, and have the contactless machine go down and people can just tap and that's it, they're done. So there is ways that you can just kind of incorporate that into the daily running of a masjid really, really easily. The other thing is anchoring. So, try and, use a little bit of psychology and a little bit of, understanding how human beings think and work. And if you kind of anchor subconsciously, and what I mean by that is, if you subconsciously put a higher number in people's heads, then typically you will end up with a higher donation. So this is why, you have those fundraisers and those dinners where they start off with, can someone donate 125,000 pounds? And all of us are looking at each other and thinking that that's like, I don't even make that in 3 years put together. So how are we going to donate that? But the reason why they do that is because it anchors the amount that you're giving to a very high amount. So eventually when they get down to 1,000, you're like, okay, finally I can potentially do this. But if they started at 1,000, you probably wouldn't give. So that's, anchoring is an important part of understanding how, human psyche works. The other thing is SMS giving. Like, if you have an imam who just says, look, guys, take out your phones, and there's a X amount, £3,000 shortfall, and I want all of you just to donate £3 to that right now. All you have to do is text, donate to 1110, whatever it is that you set up, and that's it. And everyone, again, thinking of human psychology, people love to take the phones out these days. If you give them a chance to take out their phone, they'll probably take it. And if it's a small sum, they'll probably donate it. And that's really easy to do and really easy to set up. The other thing is you should incentivize giving. So what I mean by that is, it's gone are the days where, we just ask for money and that's kind of it, and it's good obviously for the person's akhirah, and it helps the mosque, and that's it. For most people, for many people that's fine, but these days, if you look at how the best charities operate and look at how the best people are when they come to donations, they incentivize the giving. So if there is some way, shape or form that you can make people part of the community in a more substantive way, if they've donated to that community, then that is something that we should look at. So here's some worked examples, and I'm taking a bit of time over the donation section because it's probably the most important one for most masajid. So as I said, you've got over half of payments are nowadays done by card, and many people will have a mobile phone with a card loaded into it, so they don't even need their card with them, they just need their mobile phone, and everyone will have their mobile phone with them. So you have a congregation of 200 and a 10% donation rate. So on average, they're raising £200, let's say, because everyone is donating about £10-20. Now if you have a contactless card there, you could potentially double that, because there are so many people who turn up without cash, and that is a game changer, and that's really easy to do. And I was doing some Googling online, and there's this thing for churches that's available, and the churches have been doing really well as a result of this. And if you just Google contactless payment for mosque or religious organization or something, you'll get a whole range of options, and some of them are fairly cheap as well, up to £40-50 that you pay them, and then after that it's you just you have that thing ready with the software and the machine, and that's it, you're ready to go. So it doesn't have to be painful at all. The direct debit focused giving. Now, the reason why this is important is because people will give sporadically. They might give a £5 here, a £5 there. But if you commit them to a regular donation, how many subscriptions do we all have where we've been running them for so many years now, and the sole reason is because now they're out of mind, and we're kind of used to them, we've just let them run. That's what we want to be achieving with our masjid as well, right? We don't want to be, having to rely on these kind of sporadic feelings. We should be having a direct debit. And a good way of selling a direct debit is saying, look, set up a £1 a day direct debit to the masjid. In other words, £30 a month to the masjid. That is actually better than if they came to 4 Jum'ahs during the month and gave £5 each. That's an easy win right there. And then the other benefit that you get is you will typically get an email out of it as well. And once you have the email is really, really valuable, because then you can send them things afterwards and market to them afterwards. And if there's an appeal or if there's something else, you have them by email and you can monetize that. And we can talk about monetizing your audience later on as well. The really practical way you do that is you need about 5-10 people, depending on the size of the masjid, with an iPad. They don't even have to buy an iPad for the masjid specifically. You just get any old iPad that people have at home, or laptop even, and you get the form up, something like go cardless, is very popular these days, and it's a really simple form. Like direct debit forms are really simple. They don't even need any card details, anything. All they need is the account number and sort code, and many people will know that by heart, and their name, and that's it. And then you should capture their email, and then off they go. They're signed up. And think of it as a subscription to the masjid. And again, you can market this as, well, guys, you pay X amount of money to Netflix or Amazon Prime or wherever other Sky Digital or something. You've got all these subscriptions. Why don't you have a subscription to the masjid? And then if you have a subscription to the masjid, you give them incentives as well. And we'll talk about the incentives in the next slide. But again, really, really practically speaking, all you need is 100 people signing up to a £30 direct debit, and that's about £3,000. And for the average small to medium-sized masjid, £3,000 is probably about break even, because you're going to be paying the imam somewhere hopefully around 1,500 to 2,000, if not more if he's a established and qualified imam, and then the rest you have as costs. And then you possibly have some left over. So the 3,000, if you achieve that with just 100 people signing up to a direct debit, that's you done from a cost perspective. After that, anything else you make is a profit, and that you can reinvest into the community and reinvest into the masjid as well. So what do I mean by anchoring? So you could set up a contactless giving point, like they did in this church example. If you can see the picture, they've just got a contactless giving point, and link it to a £5 or £10 donation amount. So rather than letting them choose, you start off with a £10 written there already, so that if they want to go lower, they can do, but at least you've immediately put something into their minds. And then you should experiment with potentially different. So when the uncle is going around after Jum'ah during the Jum'ah with a contactless card payment thing, the preset amount on there, some days one day he could try £5, another day he could try £10, another day he could try £20. And it might be that, on the day that he tries £20, it's just too expensive for people don't use that method. But the day he tries £5, lots of people donate, but actually the day he tries £10, more people, less people donate, but because it's double the money, he actually ends up, the masjid actually ends up making more of a profit from that. So what I mean by this is that we need to have that iterative and experimental vibe to the way we approach this stuff as well. And then the final thing is that, when you think about the journey of the customer, like we do this a lot as, business people, but when you think about the customer journey, when the person comes in from the door of the masjid all the way into the musalla, what are the things that he's seeing on the wall? What are the posters that he's seeing on the wall? What's the information that he's seeing? Now, if there are a few key locations in the masjid where everyone is going to see, and you put a key verse or a key fact about how much the masjid needs, or some kind of hadith encouraging people to give charity or something along those lines, and you really, really strategically map that out so that by the time the person has come to the musalla, he will have had those 3 or 4 touch points already in his head, either consciously or subconsciously. That is a big change from when he would come into the masjid without any of those things in his head. So now when the imam says, okay, please do donate to the masjid, he's in a different mindset than he was before. And buying 3 or 4 posters is really, really cheap, and it can have such a big impact. And you should iterate on that as well. You should try different posters, right? It's a strategy that you can really run with. SMS giving, I've already talked about. The incentivization of the giving can be done in many ways. So you could say that anyone who has set up a direct debit is a subscriber to the masjid, can get restricted access to certain events. You can make them part of a quarterly donors advisory meeting so that they feel part of the masjid. And actually people who are donating money to the masjid, you should ideally make them part of the masjid and the volunteers as well. You should offer them, other kind of value adds. Like if it's a masjid in a business area, then maybe offer them the networking opportunities with other people. Or you could even set up, like many Islamic societies at university do, you could set up a discount card to local businesses. So if you subscribe to the masjid, you get this discount card, and this discount card enables you to go down to the local, the local restaurant or the local supermarket and get 5 or 10% off everything that you buy. That's actually really valuable for many people, and it's really doable as well. And it's beneficial for the businesses because they get more footfall, and it's beneficial for the masjid because more people subscribe, and it's beneficial for the person because they get a discount as well. So these are the kind of things that we could potentially use to incentivize giving and make it a pleasurable activity. The second optimization strategy that I want to talk about is madrasa optimization. And I'm going to try and really whiz through this quickly. So in a nutshell, the idea is that, the madrasa is on these days, it's in person, it's not really online. Not all people are able to come to the masjid due to the distance, difficulty, commuting, etc. The curriculum is very narrow. It's about the qaida and then hifz, or just nazar of the Quran, just reading the Quran. The quality of the teaching is patchy. Some places it's great, some places it's not so great. And the adult education is often non-existent in masajid. So the way we deal with this is by addressing each of these points. So a digital madrasa, for example, could and the practicalities of this, I won't, I'm not going to dictate that. That depends on an individual masjid and who the teachers are and what the setup is. But I would say that if you have an online component, you can dramatically increase a whole range of things. You can dramatically increase the amount of people that you can address. You can dramatically decrease the time that it might take for people to get to the masjid. You can dramatically decrease potentially the cost of providing the service as well. There's a whole range of benefits. And if you take a madrasa that has 30 kids that are paying £20 a month, let's say, going online, you suddenly have, instead of just a market of the 1 mile catchment area around the masjid, which is a tiny, tiny population, you suddenly have a market of 2 billion Muslims globally, or at least the English-speaking audience within that. That is a massive step up. And actually the best masajid, they have people who follow them from all over the world. I mean, this is a classic example, right? With this webinar, we've got people from Nigeria, the Netherlands, the Caribbean, and all sorts of places. And people will watch the recording in other places, I'm sure. So, the potential of going online is absolutely massive. And it doesn't need to be that, I appreciate that online teaching is not necessarily the same as in-person teaching. So I'm not saying replace it. I'm saying complement it. Maybe have, so I did hifz as a kid. So I went through many, many madrasas. I did, I failed in many, many madrasas until one clicked. And, the way that you teach in a madrasa, there are so many bits of it where you're just sat around not doing very much. And that, that doesn't necessarily need you to be in the masjid. You could have a very focused online section that allows you to interact with the teacher, and the rest of the time, you don't necessarily need to be, online or in the masjid. The other thing that I was going to mention is that you should have multiple classes, and you should think of it as the bundling effect. So, when you have insurance and you go on a comparison website and they say, oh, do you want legal insurance, or do you want breakdown cover, and do you want this, that, and the other? What they're doing is they're increasing your basket size from the £500 insurance that you're going to buy to ends up to something like £600-700, because you're buying all these other things as well. And you could do a similar strategy with the masjid, right? Where you say, okay, well, the Quran and the standard class is £20. But if you would like your child to also have an extra half an hour class on Aqidah, or a specific area you might want to choose, then it will be an extra, £2, £2.50 or whatever. And then you could have a specific class that, at the end of every class, we'll have half an hour of wrestling, or we'll have half an hour of football if your masjid can do that, or something like that. And the kids will want to do that. and they will stick around for that, and they will probably, as a result of that, take out that middle class as well, and you can have the football class for another £2.50, and suddenly you go from £2 to £25, which is a big increase. It's a 25% increase on what you were previously paying. Then the other thing that you could do is you could have a gym style approach. So you have trainers in the gym. You join a gym and you've got trainers roaming around in the gym, and you can actually have personal classes with those trainers as well. Now you could have a similar approach with the masjid, where you have 2 or 3 huffaz who are looking to teach students on an individual basis, and you say, okay, you advertise on this board that we have advertising the huffaz of the masjid, and any people that come through you, then you have to pay us 25%, for example, or they just pay a fee to the masjid just to feature on that board, and as a result of that, the masjid gets some money out of it. And that's a really easy way of potentially monetizing. And then the third and final way, I think, is adult education. Many of us, we might have grown up and we might not have been as practicing in our youth as we are today. And there are many people who will take out alim classes or hifz classes. My sister is currently doing a hifz class. I'm studying with a teacher in Egypt at the moment, some hadith. Muhsin is studying an alim class online. So there is real demand for these classes. And if you have an imam who is a qualified alim, then he could potentially teach a whole range of subjects that you didn't even realize that you could potentially be teaching. And you can actually really build a community around this as well then, because anyone who's doing a long-term alim course with a madrasa, you develop a real tight bond with that class, and they then become the potential volunteers for that masjid as well. So I'll whiz through this one because it's a nice obvious one, but paid seminars and courses, right? If you are addressing a real pain point of the community that isn't available elsewhere, and you've got someone who's qualified coming in, and you do a good job in marketing that course or seminar, then you are going to be making some profit. So what I mean by that is, let's have a worked example, and this could probably be a course that most masajid around the world can deliver today, and it's much needed. So an external speaker comes in, delivers a weekend course to parents on talking to children about drugs, pornography, and sexuality. You have all this rise of lesbian, gays, and transgender issues, and children are confused about that, and parents don't know how to talk to their kids about all this stuff. Now, you can either sign up in person or online, which massively increases the target audience. And let's say you have 50 parents sign up at £30, right? So that's £1,500 that the masjid has made. The speaker is paid, let's say, £300 for the day. Some speakers may not take any payment, some speakers might take more. And then the masjid, as a result of that, has made £1,200. So that's a weekend seminar, and the masjid has made £1,200. It's much needed stuff. People will pay for it. And also the masjid can benefit from it as well. It just needs someone who's going to put a bit of effort in coordinating the whole activity. But this is a nice, easy thing that we can do. The other thing that masajid should be looking at is not just focusing on Islamic education, but also focusing on wider classes to the community, really trying to become part of the community. And it might even be, catering for non-Muslims, so that they are coming into the masjid and seeing what the masjid is like. Because only when the non-Muslims are coming into the masjid do they then actually see Islam properly, and they become part of the community, and ultimately they might become Muslim themselves. And these classes can range from things like sports to tutoring, knitting, sewing, calligraphy, public speaking, interview skills, all sorts of things can be done. So let's give you a really practical worked example. I know in Birmingham there's a big push towards 11 plus exams, because you get better schools once you pass your 11 plus exams successfully, grammar schools, and people want to get their kids into that. Now, if a masjid there sets up an 11 plus exam support class with a qualified teacher and says to the teacher, look, you take 75% of the fees, but you just use our masjid as a facility and also as a base to advertise to people. And we make it clear that the masjid is making sure that this is under the authority of the masjid. and the teacher charges £10 per child, for example, and runs 4 classes a week of 5 kids. The teacher, as a result, will take £600 a month, and the masjid could take £200 a month, for example. And that's just one kind of class. Now, if you have another class, which is a wrestling class or a calligraphy class or a public speaking class or a computer skills class, suddenly, the masjid, if it will have lots of space, it has lots of spare capacity because there's only 5 times that people actually pray in there. The rest of the time is empty. Now, if you use that wisely, then suddenly, you have about £1,000 a month coming in with very little effort, because the teacher or the gym instructor or whoever it is who's going to be leading that class, they are the ones who are very incentivized to make it all work. And so they will be taking on the brunt of the burden. The masjid just takes the £200 at the end of the month. And the benefit also of this is the footfall. So more people are coming to the masjid, and the more people that are coming to the masjid, the more people are going to be donating on the contactless thing that you've set up. The more people will be seeing the subliminal messages that you've got on the walls. The more people will be signing up to the other classes and the other things that you've got going on, and it becomes a virtuous cycle where they're actually staying in the loop. The other thing is product partnerships. So you can have, all sorts of different products that are sold very directly from the masjid, such as wills, Hajj and Umrah, funerals, detailed fatwa consultancy, circumcision. All of these things I've seen masajid do successfully, and with the wills one in particular, because IFG offer wills, we've seen it done successfully with masajid as well. So the key priorities of the masjid when they're entertaining this kind of activity, because here, for the first time, you're dealing with a business, right? So you want to be a bit careful about a few things. The first is there shouldn't be any leakage, right? So often what happens is if you agree with someone that the masjid will, carry their advertisement. Let's say it's a driving instructor, and they say, look, if someone comes to us via you, actually, let's not use the driving instructor example. I actually don't think masjids necessarily should be promoting too much of wider business, but let's use the example of Hajj and Umrah. And the Hajj and Umrah company say, look, let me put up a poster. If anyone comes through you, then we will pay the masjid X amount of money. That's all fine. But the problem is many people will find out about the Hajj and Umrah through the masjid, but they won't tell the Hajj and Umrah company that we found out about it through the masjid. And so the masjid will not really benefit from that, and they have all obviously advertised. So you need to have a clear way of making sure that there is a way of making sure people do mention the masjid. It might be that if you mention the masjid, you get a discount, or you get some other kind of perk, for example, or something along those lines. The other thing is you don't want there to be brand risk. So, for example, with circumcision, lots of non-Muslims also offer circumcision, but I think it might be awkward if, for example, you let in, a Jewish rabbi, or certain black communities have circumcision as part of their culture who are not Muslim. So if you let someone in who is not Muslim to do that in the masjid, then that could be a potential brand risk, for example. And then the final thing, I think it needs to be on an Islamic topic. And the reason why I say that is because if you are using the masjid's reach, the reason why people come to masjid is because of the Islamic aspect. So you don't want to be using the masjid to sell, driving instruction or other things necessarily. I think there are ways that you can do that, and we'll talk about that later on perhaps. But the main thing should be, Islamic products. So we've, because we've worked in this, we've knocked up an example of IFG wills that we've seen. The way that Islamic wills work is everyone in the UK needs an Islamic will if they're a Muslim, because otherwise they're going to die and they're going to have their assets distributed according to English law, which is obviously not ideal. And the average masjid, we find, could result in about 100 wills. Now, IFG wills pays £20 per will and £50 per trust-based will. All of these other places like the Hajj and Umrah people, the funeral people, the circumcision people, the fatwa consultancy people, like the Islamic Fiqh Council, or all of those people will have their own rates. And on that, on this kind of basis, you suddenly could make the masjid around 2,500 to 3,000 pounds. And you could put up a QR code based poster on the masjid and just tell people to use that link. And it could be that, you know, because you're using that specific link, it's actually made sure that the link that you're using to get to the will, or the Hajj and Umrah package or whatever it is actually directly linked to the masjid. So the masjid will benefit from that. And then you could do like an initial event for raising awareness, and off you go. And, you know, going back to my point about how the break even for a masjid per month is £3,000. Now, people will be going on Hajj and Umrah. People will be dying. People will need detailed fatwas for their, you know, if they're going into some technical area, they'll need that. People will be having their circumcision. Now, if the masjid is catering for that, the first thing is it's beneficial for the community. And the second thing is you're suddenly picking up, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 pounds in each of these areas. And that really adds up very quickly. And actually, there are certain masajid, the bigger ones, who have, you know, their own Hajj and Umrah packages now that they run because they are that, you know, lucrative for them. And others will do the funerals in-house, and others will do the detailed fatwa consultancy in-house. Others will even do the circumcision and the wills in-house. So all of these things, you know, make a start on them, and who knows where it could take you. So the other thing that we could do is hall hire. There are so many masajid, you know, that have brilliant spaces that are really not used very well. The first thing to be done is, you know, put them up for hire, get comfortable around that, make sure that you take the adequate precautions to make sure that there's no free mixing, etc., and, you know, there's no disturbance, what have you. The other thing that you can do is really try and add value to the room by adding coffee machines or projector and presentation equipment, video recording equipment, audio recording equipment, having a shoe-friendly area and a musalla area, catering for women, catering for non-Muslims, have an opened area or a tabled area, include a carpeted and non-carpeted area, and offer packages with the local wedding caterers or decorators. And suddenly, you know, if you do all of that stuff, the masjid becomes a really appealing proposition as a place to hire out. And if you hire a masjid hall out, and this is a cheap estimate, by the way, because when we've had weddings, we've had to pay a lot more. But let's say you hire a hall out £100 per month, and you do that just 5 times. That's £500 a month. That's £6,000 a year. That is going to be beneficial for the masjid, inshallah. And it's easy to do. The other one that is, I think, quite a hidden one, and this is not one that I've, you know, fully worked out yet myself, but I think if a masjid is doing clothes donation, they should definitely look into this quite carefully. But the fact is that 350 million tons of clothes are imported from the UK every year. And globally, this used clothes trading business is valued at more than 2.8 billion. So masjid donations and the clothes that are collected could be worth hundreds of pounds. And this is just something that I pulled up on eBay, where, you know, you've got clothes bags being sold for 50, 25, £100. You could do it. You don't necessarily have to do all the sorting and admin yourself. You could just work with a local charity, and rather than, you know, the local charity then making a big profit from it, you could say, look, we're a masjid, we're a charity as well. Give us a little bit of that as well. And on that point, I know that you know, another way that you can use the charitable aspect is, and this is not something on the slides, but I was talking to Rizwan, who's I think on the call, from Euro Quality Lambs, which is the largest lamb abattoir in Europe, mashallah, and they do a lot of charity lamb zabihas. And the benefit that the masjid gets from that, if they organize all of the, you know, the charity zabihas for their area, is they can claim back, you know, I can't remember the exact the number, but they can claim back the gift aid on the basis of that charity donation. But Rizwan, do you want to say a few words if you're on the call now?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi, assalamu alaikum everyone. Assalamu alaikum Ibrahim. I've turned my camera on as well, so I don't know if people can see, because sometimes it's easier to see who you're speaking to. But yeah, this is something that when Ibrahim was telling me that they were doing this, it's something that we've been doing for many charities for the last few years. And that's that there's more and more our business, as Ibrahim elaborated. Alhamdulillah, we're the biggest Muslim-owned lamb abattoir in Europe. We do a lot of exports to France, Germany, in particular. I think someone's thank you. So off the back of that, we do a lot of qurbanis, personal qurbanis for customers. And there's been more and more charity qurbanis that's been done more recently. So we work with Islamic Relief, we work with Hugs, and a lot of people who do the personal qurbanis also do a charitable element as well. And because of the average cost of qurbani has been going up each year because of the seasonality of lambs, the gift aid attributable to the qurbanis comes out at over £40 per qurbani. Now that's if the congregation member gives the whole of the qurbani away in charity. But even if you had half of your congregation performing a full charity qurbani with yourself, that is, on average over £40 per congregation member. So it does add up. And the mosques do have the ability to receive that meat to then distribute it out locally. We worked with Green Lane Mosque this year through Islamic Relief, Masjid al-Falah in Birmingham as well. So there is another angle here where there is some significant through gift aid raising income for the masjid, and also increasing the masjid's visibility by doing this meat distribution at the same time as well. I'll also put up a link on the group chat so people can see how we used charity meat this year, but that's just another option for masjids to consider. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair, Rizwan, and really appreciate that input. I've actually been to Rizwan's lamb abattoir, and it's mashallah, it's a fantastic operation. And actually, if you guys are interested, I did a podcast with Rizwan where we did a tour of the lamb abattoir. So you can check that out on our podcast, and we discuss things like, zabiha and stun, slaughter, all of that stuff as well. So, that's a side topic, but you can look into that. Just catching up with the comments that people have been making in the chat. Apologies, I can't really see the chat when I'm on the slides, but yeah, you're very right to point out that contactless does incur payment. So you need to weigh up you need to do the kind of cost benefit analysis. And I actually think the uncle should be going around with a bucket and a contactless card machine, so that you get people who will have cash and they don't necessarily want to keep the cash, so they'll get rid of the cash in the donation bucket, and that often happens to me and others. But then you have people who don't have any cash, but they still want to donate, and you capture them as well. And you can iterate on it, right? You can try different weeks, different strategies, different combinations, until you know exactly that this is the one that has the most returns, and that's the one that you then go for. The final thing that I want to really say before I close and open up for a bit of Q&A and maybe some sharing of experiences is how to monetize your audience. Now, I know that this sounds a bit I guess businessy, but it's not meant to sound that way, because Masajid already do it, but we just don't think of our audience as something that you can monetize, right? Because Masajid have a location where people come. They often have emails, lists of emails, lists of phone numbers, and they have warmth with that community. Now, they can use that strategically and wisely to monetize a little bit. So very common is to sponsor the calendar, for example, of the masjid, and have a local business sponsor that. And many masjids do that, and it's it's fairly common, and people are comfortable with that. That is monetizing your audience, right? So you're already, most massages are already comfortable with it. All I'm doing is consider other ways that this can also happen. So another way could be to build up your email list. And once you have an email list built up, there are a range of ways that you can potentially share something that might be beneficial to your audience. For example, Al-Maghrib courses, right? You might strike up a deal with Al-Maghrib and say, look, can you pay us, 5% or 10% of any fees that sign up for this course via us, for example. I don't know if Al-Maghrib even offer this, but it's an example, and you could share that around to your audience. It's a value add for your audience, and also, the masjid will do well out of it. And that's the power of having an email list. The other thing that you could do is have a business board. So this is a really specific board in the masjid where the driving instructors of the world and all of the other businesses of the world can actually feature. And to feature, they need to pay a minimal fee, and on they go onto that board. And that is another way that a masjid can monetize the footfall that is coming past that door and past that board. The other way to think about this is that a masjid is a place where the community comes. A masjid is a place that connects up people. So think about all of those businesses or all of those agent type businesses. A masjid can often be a great way of replacing that. So, for example, you might even replace an estate agent. I mean, this is just an idea that came to me, but if you've got a fairly large masjid where there's lots of buying and selling of houses going on, cut out the estate agent fees. The masjid can be the estate agent. You put up the advert for this is a house for sale, and instead of paying 1,500 to the estate agent, you just pay a £400-500 donation to the masjid if ultimately the house is sold because of the masjid's advert. That is a potentially easy way of monetizing a piece of the wall of the masjid. Another way could be a jobs board where you pay people to put up jobs, and then people can hire them, or people can be hired from those jobs. And then the other thing that you could do is a nikah service. So have a black book, and you've got the imam or the imam's wife or whoever it is who runs it, who will help people meet opposite gender eligible bachelors, and make those introductions. And it costs like a small fee to be part of that service. Now, all of this, I stress that all of this needs to be done with a little bit of taste and a little bit of caution, because things could go wrong when you do this particular kind of strategy. So it needs to be very, very step by step, and make sure that it's not tarnishing the reputation and brand and feeling of the masjid when you do this. So it has to be very, very step by step. So 2 more things really from me. So this is the kind of stuff, and maybe you guys can comment in the chat if you think this might be useful. So things that I'd also thought about, which I didn't really go through because there's no time, was thinking about wider events like fairs for local businesses and ethnic groups that I've seen done quite successfully, setting up a gym, having a Dragon's Den every quarter and monetizing that, and encouraging entrepreneurship, building out social media, email lists, and YouTube. And this is stuff that we do at IFG, so we could talk about that very easily. Publishing, lots of potential money to be made there if you have access to good authors. A masjid shop or takeaway could be an idea. Establish a focus on a certain sport and build classes and tournaments around that. Lots of places in the US are focused around basketball and done really well out of that. And then you've got wider things as well, like local councils offer grants for people to teach migrants English and computer skills. You can talk to people like the Roundtree Foundation and others who are looking to support initiatives like this, and you could get funding for that. I'm purposely saying don't go. I'm not saying go to the government, because for many people that would be a no-no, and I think that that would probably be a no-no for the right reasons. But you can get local council money or local grant money, which could be actually really helpful for the masjid, and also provide a great service. And then the final thing could be paid advertising of key digital assets. So things like your website, if you have a YouTube or social media presence or email presence, then things like that as well. So those are the kind of things that we could potentially talk about. Please just comment away in the chat if you think that would be useful, and then if it is, then afterwards I can catch up with the rest of the team, and we can potentially arrange something, inshallah, on that as well. The final things I really want to leave you with before we wrap up are, firstly, be scientific in your approach. Be very test focused and iterative focused. You should not have a debate or a disagreement with other committee members on what to do. What should happen is say, okay, I don't know. You don't know. Let's test it out. If it doesn't work, then we'll do the way you said, and we'll go with whatever is better. There's no ego in this. It's all about what actually works. So be scientific about this. Be focused. Try one thing at a time and in a few different ways. So don't do all of these 8 strategies at once. Just focus on one thing, the donations thing, for example, and iterate on that and get that perfect. Make that, absolutely bang on, then move on and add another revenue stream and get that right, and then move on after that. Be numbers driven and have clear targets, because that often helps keep the momentum. And then final thing is know your weaknesses and failings and get the right people involved. So if you know that your imam is great at recitation but not so great at public speaking, then just be aware of that and address that issue. If you know that you are good at organization, but you're not very good at the marketing aspect, then appreciate that. Like you need to then get someone in on the marketing side. Often masajid fail because people are just too scared to admit that they're weak in a particular field. We need to make sure that we keep the egos out of this. The final thing is that we are more than happy, frankly, to do this all over the world, because for us this is our mission, to do events and talk to people about personal finance in particular. So we've done a whole bunch of events in places like Barking Mosque. We did one for the Bristol people, lots of ISOCs, where we just run through all the different topics around Islamic personal finance, like halal investing, riba, Islamic mortgages, all of that kind of weird and wonderful stuff that we write about on the website. We also then cover it over a 1-hour session with local communities. So feel free, if that is appealing to your masjid, to just drop me a line and we can organize something. But with that, I'll wrap up and open up for Q&A. So feel free to speak up or write the question.
Assalamualaikum Ibrahim, it's Mohsin here. I've written this in the chat, but I just wanted to expand on one of your points about the £30 direct debit thing.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that one thing that masajid are really good at with kind of local volunteers and activists is just knocking on doors in the community, and you literally could just have a solid day of activity from a whole bunch of volunteers, and the aim is that together we get 100 signups per month. And that would be £3,000 a month, but by the end of the year, if you do that month in, month out, all of a sudden the masjid's got 36 grand recurring revenue, and that's the way of kind of utilizing that human power, I guess, because volunteers do mashallah an amazing job, and this could very much be something that would add to the sustainability of masajid up and down the country.
No, Jazakallah khair for that.
Ibrahim?
Yeah, go for it, Rizwan.
This presentation is obviously focused on income generation. You haven't really looked at sort of where costs could be saved with regards to utilities and other things. Is that deliberate?
I mean, I think I got so carried away on the income generation, I didn't even get to the costs. But yeah, definitely, I think I'll need to factor that in future presentations. If you've got any ideas now, then absolutely love to hear them.
I think one of the things that the MCB are working on a project on is best practice council of mosques. And I see the council of mosques, because not every masjid can become an expert in how they monetize their website or how they do particular income generation schemes. But if you had a local council of mosques that then can pool some of these expertise together, then once a mosque has become quite good at a particular element, they could, for example, for a fee, even help other masjids in the nearby region deploy those skills that they've learned in their own mosque. And each masjid in a region could become an expert at a particular income generation and then use that to help others as well. Just an idea.
For sure. And I think even just like a really simple one on the costs is that often masajid have just set up some kind of utility bill agreement many years ago, and they're just paying that because no one is incentivized or bothered to change it. Just comparing once again after a while can dramatically, I think help.
Well, we know in our business, for example, that we can get one contract for our electricity and gas across many different properties. And if something like that was done at a level, you could get a better utility rate for your electricity and gas. But that's something that needs coordination at the local level.
That's fascinating, that is one. So, and does it have to be a local level? I guess because not all utility providers provide for everyone, do they?
These days they do, because the retail arm has been separated out from the generation arm. So a lot of your retail sellers of utilities, they buy in bulk from the generators, whether that's electricity, gas, water. So they become basically more like your rebillers. And depending on how much volume you're putting through that rebill account, they could give you a better deal on just offering as one property. It will need some utility experts to sort of enact that. But it's another option to consider.
Definitely.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Assalamualaikum, this is Wajid. I just want to thank you guys for a fantastic presentation. Very useful and very practical tips as well for Masjid. And on that point, alhamdulillah, actually, there are people in the Muslim community who are experts in utility and getting the best deal. There are yourselves who are the experts in terms of finances and managing that and maximizing that. There are alhamdulillah Muslims in the online donation sector. So we're getting lots of different of these people come together. And as Brother Rizwan was saying, there are some groups kind of coalescing now in and around the MCB to start bringing these different experts together. And inshallah, if we can pool our abilities and talents and the grassroots game, this could be a real game changer, inshallah, in the UK.
For sure. I think it's great that people are moving in that direction. I think the more we work together, inshallah, the better we can be. Even from an economic perspective, interestingly enough, what people found was on this website called Substack, which has come up recently, which is a website where you can subscribe to various different authors and writers. And what they found was that if you bundle the subscriptions together with a few other authors, then actually everyone in that bundle would benefit. The reason is because not everyone wants to benefit from Abdul all the time, so much so that they just subscribe to him, and because of that they don't pay that fee of £15 for Abdul, whereas they would for Zakaria. But Zakaria's followers, they don't necessarily, it's vice versa, right? So Abdul's followers wouldn't necessarily subscribe to Zakaria, but if you've got a bundle, more people subscribe. So I guess there's also that benefit as well, right? So with Masjid, when they're working together and collaborating, you actually get more than the whole, if that makes sense. Brilliant. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. I know that it's been going on for a while as well. Microsoft do offer massive discounts on software for charity organizations like Masjid. So definitely take advantage of that. Maybe I'll give it another 30 seconds to a minute if people want to have any other questions or comments or just want to speak up on this call itself. Feel free. And then inshallah after that we'll look to wrap up. I am thinking quite deeply about this utility thing now. You've got it in my head, Rizwan. I'm going to try and work out a way to see if it can be coordinated, because there's no reason why, if all the masajid came together, maybe this is one to work with the MCB through as well, Wajid. You know, if a utility contract was negotiated and then offered, you know, relatively cheaply to all the different masajid, it sounds like it could be done.
100%, inshallah. A fantastic idea. Fantastic idea.
So let me, that's a good shout on this, Rizwan. Let me just share the link to the forum so people know where it is. And let me just set up a thread on there now so people can contribute to that thread. But yeah, all you need to do on the forum is just register. It's nice and easy, and then you can just comment away. So I'll set up a thread now, and people can contribute there and keep this conversation going, inshallah. Well, it's been a pleasure, everyone. Jazakallah khair for making the time and giving your contributions as well. That I think has made this a more enriching experience, and sharing your thoughts and strategies as well. Inshallah, we will circulate through the recording of this and also the presentation as well, once we've wrapped up from the call. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum.